After breaking up with Calvin, I always thought we would get back together. I waited for a week, a month, 3 months, until I found out he had a new girlfriend. That day, I cried all the tears I had left. I begged him with no dignity or self-respect, pleading for him to look back at me. Then he told me, "Eva, don't do this. It looks cheap." Later, his relationship with the new girl ended, and he came back to find me. I went back to him, despite all my friends' objections, regaining what was lost. I thought I would cherish and accommodate him better, but after getting back together, I realized that maybe I didn't love him as much as I thought I did. Chapter 1. After getting back together with Calvin, he posted an update. The photo was of me looking down and drinking coffee, with the caption, "A broken mirror mended." Then he mentioned me, but in just a short while, our mutual friends flooded the post with comments, some shocked, some swearing, and most offering their congratulations. I stared at the post. Calvin sat across from me, smiling. He was still handsome, though the sharpness of his youthful looks had softened into a more restrained maturity. He watched me scroll through my phone, smiling as if waiting for my reaction. I looked at the post for a while, smiled, and then turned off my phone and set it down on the table. I didn't comment, didn't like the post, nor did I post anything myself. I simply smiled at Calvin and said, "This coffee is pretty good." It was the same old coffee shop, the same iced Americano, the same taste. I was just changing the subject. Calvin probably understood. His gaze shifted from my phone to my face, his eyes showing some disappointment and sadness. But he paused for a moment, hiding it, then smiled and asked, "Do you have time tonight? A new Spanish restaurant opened nearby, and the food's pretty good. I'll take you there." I smiled apologetically and said, "Sorry, I have to work late tonight. I'll just order takeout." He finally fell silent. After a while, he remained courteous and said, "Then I'll drive you back to the office." I didn't refuse this time. After getting back to the office, I ended up staring blankly at the computer for a long while. I lied to Calvin. I didn't need to work overtime. The deadline for this file was next week, and I had plenty of time to finish the proposal. I just wanted to avoid being alone with him. I don't know why, but after getting back together with Calvin, I didn't feel the joy or satisfaction I thought I would. My heart was completely still as I looked at the post he made announcing it, and I felt nothing but indifference. I sighed, not understanding what was wrong with me. I really loved Calvin. How much? Enough that even after we broke up, I waited for him for 3 years. It wasn't intentional, though. I had no shortage of people pursuing me. But after breaking up with him, I just couldn't bring myself to care about anyone else. No desire to get to know someone. No desire to communicate. No desire to go out on dates. Elise had once scolded me, "You're not planning to stay loyal to that jerk, are you? Is he really worth it? Is he worth it?" Probably not. Chapter 2. The breakup with Calvin wasn't exactly graceful. After our long-distance relationship in college, we sometimes had small arguments, making up, then fighting again, having cold wars, and then making up once more. Eventually, there was a period when his attitude toward me grew cold. His tone on the phone became distant. He would no longer reply to messages, and he would forget to say goodnight. His mood would fluctuate from warm to cold. These things kept me up at night, but I stayed calm. I went to his university to talk, with the intention of solving things. At that time, their school happened to be celebrating its anniversary, and he was playing a duet on the piano with a junior. The scene was beautiful beyond words. I heard someone nearby sigh in awe. They make such a good couple. Are they really a couple? All the accumulated feelings of grievance and unease exploded at that moment. I had been telling myself to stay calm, but I had forgotten what the argument was about. In a fit of anger, I said, "Then let's break up." I didn't actually want to break up at that moment. I just wanted him to comfort me. But at that moment, he stood there with a blank expression, looked at me, and coldly said, "All right, let's break up then." I turned around and walked away. At that point, both Calvin and I were quite proud people. We had always been surrounded by people who admired us, so neither of us had learned to humble ourselves or accommodate others. But during the time I was with him, because I loved him, I had already suppressed my own nature quite well. I was always the one to lower my head and compromise first, knowing that he didn't care, at least not as much as I did. In love, there is always one person who is in the lower position. Back then, because I loved him, I put aside my pride and self-respect. But it seemed like he didn't care much about me. As I turned away, I actually thought, Calvin, can't you just lower your head and comfort me? Just once? He didn't. In the time after we broke up, I kept up the appearance of being indifferent and carefree. But every time I saw a message notification on WeChat, my heart would tighten and I'd feel a small flicker of hope. Could it be from Calvin? But every time I opened it, I was just met with disappointment. The 15th day after we cut contact was when I finally couldn't hold it in anymore and reached out to him, asking when he was going to come pick up the game console he had left at my place. It took a long time before he replied, "Throw it away." I responded with, "Okay." Then he never spoke to me again. Later, I set his messages to do not disturb. I thought he would never understand why I did that. But I guess he probably didn't care anyway. I spent every day staring at his various social media updates. But Calvin was a very low-key person. He rarely posted anything. His updates were probably only twice a year. I stared at his empty profile every day. And one day, my heart felt out of balance. It happened after my political theory class. As I was walking down the stairs, I, as usual, opened his TikTok profile, only to find his following count had increased by 1. I clicked on it, and there was a very cute avatar. The account was of an ordinary user, verified as being from the same university, but it was a private account. I can't even describe the emotions I felt at that moment. It was like being thrown into a swimming pool without knowing how to swim, suffocating for a moment. With everything around me vanishing, the world spinning in dizziness, leaving me alone, lonely and scared. Just me. My hands and feet trembled uncontrollably as I stared at the unfamiliar account. I left and came back again, looked over and over, but that account was real. No matter how many times I looked, it didn't disappear. It was the height of summer, but standing on the stairs, I felt like I had fallen into an ice cave. But I tried to convince myself, clinging to a bit of hope. Maybe it was just a friend, a college classmate, following each other's TikTok accounts. It was probably nothing. Maybe I was just too distracted. When I went down the stairs, I missed a step and fell all the way down. It was twisted. But while my classmates screamed loudly around me, a trace of relief rose in my heart. What I thought in that moment was, I finally have a reason to contact you. Calvin. Chapter 3. It's hard to imagine that I once secretly felt happy just because I could text Calvin and have a legitimate reason to do so. But now, when I received a message from him, I didn't really want to reply. Around 8 p.m., I got a message from Calvin. He said he had bought me some late-night snacks and would deliver them around 8:30. I politely replied, "No need. It's too much trouble. You should get some rest." He said, "I want to see you, Eva." I reluctantly opened my delivery app, ordered something, and sent him a screenshot to let him know I had ordered my own food. He replied a while later, "All right. Enjoy your meal." I didn't reply. To be honest, Calvin had become more considerate and accommodating, even better than when we first started dating. Now, it was me who was distracted, indifferent, and unconcerned. It was him who was patient, accommodating, cautious, and nervous. It was as if the more I didn't care about him, the more he loved me. I chuckled bitterly, not sure why, but when the food arrived, I sent him a photo. It felt like the owner of a neglected dog, throwing it a couple of bones out of pity. Calvin's reply came quickly, as if he had been waiting by his phone. He asked, "Kanji?" I didn't reply immediately. After a while, I answered in a cold tone, "Seafood kanji." He replied in seconds, asking, "Which restaurant? Is it good?" I didn't respond. I just stared at his message and shut my phone off. It was strange. If this had been before, I would have eagerly shared the details without him asking. The seafood kanji from a small alley restaurant. The peanuts were crunchy, the kanji thick and sticky, the seafood generous, crispy, soft, and smooth. I really liked it. I'm not a talkative person, but when it came to someone I liked, I could never stop sharing. But now, I had no desire to share anything with him. I closed my phone and went on with my own business, probably because I hadn't replied to his message. After a while, he sent me a screenshot, his post's comment. A friend had commented, "I knew you two would end up together. No one is more suited for each other than you two." I smiled. Calvin and we really were a perfect match. He had gotten used to being adored by everyone around him. He seemed easygoing, but in reality, he was extremely picky. I once asked Calvin why he wanted to be with me. He looked at me nonchalantly and, in an almost matter-of-fact tone, said, "Because you're the best one in the crowd." I smiled. Since the day he was born, he had only the best of everything: clothes, food, and everything else. So of course, he'd want the best girl in the crowd. Before he changed his mind and fell in love with someone else, we were the couple everyone thought was perfect. Back when we weren't even dating in high school, we were voted the most perfect couple for 2 years in a row. He was the most handsome guy in school, the golden child, with great grades and a great family. Of course, I wasn't bad either. I was beautiful, not only good at my studies but also often appearing on the school event stage, hosting, playing piano, dancing. With a calm and steady demeanor, we were the perfect match in everyone's eyes, and we were each other's first love. So, I never imagined that, during our long-distance college years, he could change his mind and fall for someone else so quickly. Chapter 4. The day I fell down the stairs was the first month after I cut contact with Calvin. Finally, I found an excuse to reach out to him. I sent him a photo. It was a picture of my ankle, heavily wrapped in a cast. From the moment I sent it, I was distracted, deliberately forcing myself not to check WeChat. Many friends and classmates came to visit me, and I handled it all with perfect composure, deliberately making myself seem busy, until the stream of visitors gradually stopped, and the medical room became quiet again. Pretending not to care, I picked up my phone and opened WeChat. Calvin had replied to me 3 minutes ago. His message was short. Just a few words: "Rest well." I kept reading those few words over and over again. At first, a wave of joy rose in my heart. He replied to me. But then came the long, lingering feeling of disappointment. He didn't ask what happened, didn't say he would come to see me, just a polite, distant "rest well," as if he were a regular friend I hadn't spoken to in a long time. I sighed and didn't reply. When I was finally able to walk, he didn't send me another message. I went to find him on the 42nd day after we cut contact. It was his birthday, and the night before, Calvin had rarely posted an update. The dark night sky, with brilliant fireworks. No caption, but I stared at it for a long time, and I remembered that, a week before our breakup, I had told Calvin that we would watch fireworks together on his birthday. I didn't know what Calvin's post meant, but I looked at it again and again, and from the bottom of my heart, a secret joy surged. I thought, maybe he posted it for me. After all, he only posted a few times a year. I didn't know why. But when you like someone, you can't help but become humble, confused, and full of uncertainty. From childhood to now, I've always been a capable person, clear goals, mature for my age. But only with Calvin had I done something like this, endlessly analyzing someone's social media posts, trying to find a connection between us. My rational mind told me that if a man didn't come to find you, he didn't want to. If he didn't message you, he didn't want to message you. If he didn't try to get you back, he wasn't afraid of losing you. But reason could only analyze it. It couldn't control my emotions. When you miss someone, all you can do is think about them. When you love someone, all you can do is love them. You won't wake up completely until you hit your head against the wall repeatedly. So, after seeing Calvin's post, it felt like I found an excuse. I grabbed his game console, the gift I had prepared for him, lowered my pride, and gathered the last bit of courage. On his birthday, I went to his university to find him. I waited for over 4 hours under his teaching building, until finally, in the evening, I saw him come back. He wasn't alone. He was accompanied by a girl, petite and cute, wearing a dress. Leaning against him, she was holding a candied hawthorn on a stick, chatting and laughing with him, her hands waving around as she spoke. It was the junior who had played the duet with him at the school anniversary event. Calvin was holding her little bear-shaped bag, smiling at her, his head tilted as he focused on her, even glancing at the ground to make sure she didn't trip. I followed behind them, watching as Calvin escorted the girl to the entrance of her dormitory building. He stood at the door, waiting until her figure disappeared inside. Then, he looked up, and after what felt like a long time, she appeared on the dormitory balcony, waving at Calvin, who waved back at her before finally turning around. And as soon as he turned, he saw me. I held back tears, standing there, calling out to him, "Calvin." The smile on his face faded instantly when he saw me, his brow furrowing tightly, a look of impatience I knew all too well. Perhaps because he was worried the girl might notice something, he unusually didn't lose his temper. He patiently said, "Don't talk here, let's go somewhere else." That day was probably the most humiliating moment of my life. I grabbed Calvin's sleeve and refused to let go, crying hoarsely. I still don't know why I had so many tears, crying so hard that it was hard to breathe. All I could repeat were 3 sentences. "So I wasn't wrong, right? How could you not want me anymore?" And the third, "Please, I'm begging you." This was the kind of helpless, bottomless humility. Whenever I think about it, I'm still amazed that I said those things. Calvin remained indifferent, letting me cry. His handsome face was cold and unfeeling, distant, almost inhuman. Finally, after enduring my sobs, probably growing tired of my tears, he said, "This is the last time. Eva, we're broken up. Don't bother me again." Yes, we broke up. I was the one who brought it up. During the nights when I couldn't sleep, tossing and turning, endlessly scrolling through his social media, trying to find any trace of us, hoping to find a reason for my sleepless nights. In those nights when I thought he would at least feel a little sad. In those nights when I waited for him to come find me. It turned out, he was chatting away with someone new every night. The fireworks, they weren't for me. After all, he was living so happily after the breakup. He wasn't like me, staring at his profile picture, unable to sleep, restless, debating whether to send a message or not. It wasn't my paranoia, my anxious fears after the breakup. He had already planned for it. The only one hurting was me. Not long after, he posted an official announcement on his social media. Chapter 5. The day he made the official announcement was even my birthday. As I kept checking WeChat over and over, waiting for his message, he updated his status. "It's your summer exclusive. And also your forever. If possible, I'd like you to be mine all year round." The picture was of a girl smiling with an ice cream in her hand, her eyes and smile bright and warm. He pinned the post to the top of his profile. In that moment, I couldn't breathe. My hand holding the phone shook uncontrollably as I stared at the post. It felt as if I couldn't read, unable to process the words. I kept looking at them over and over, making sure I understood, yet still couldn't react. It wasn't until a mutual friend of Calvin and I sent me a message. "No way. Eva, you two really broke up? Oh my God. How could this happen? Was there anyone more perfect for each other than you two? It's such a shame. I thought no matter what, you two would always end up back together." I thought the same. I thought we would get back together too. Before I could fully process, I had already sent him a message, asking, "Are you with her now?" I lay there waiting, endlessly turning the phone over in my hands, waiting for a reply. After a long while, 2 hours passed with no response. But 2 minutes ago, he had commented under his official post, "Thanks for the wishes." He was deliberately ignoring my messages. Even posting that status was likely to make me give up, to stop bothering him. After that, I never disturbed him again. I disappeared completely from his world, without a trace. Until 5 years later, when we crossed paths again, at a project meeting. He was the client, and my boss and I had prepared a proposal to meet with the project manager. I never expected that I'd see Calvin there. I'm not sure if I showed any signs of surprise, but I felt like I should remain calm. After I finished presenting the proposal, the project manager smiled and complimented me, saying, "Eva, you're truly impressive." I smiled back. This was a compliment I had heard countless times since I started working. Every person who met me for the first time thought I was just a pretty face. No substance behind it. Because my appearance was too striking, everyone assumed beautiful women had no brains. It wasn't until Calvin, who had been silent this whole time, finally spoke up, saying she was in the top 3 in high school for years, never falling out. Only then did I give him my first glance that day. I didn't ignore the surprise in his eyes. Later, he invited me to dinner. He sighed and told me he had looked for me before, but I had disappeared completely, and he couldn't get in touch with me. I didn't ask when he broke up with the girl from school. I don't know if all new relationships are like this, unable to escape the 3-month novelty, with nostalgia and longing arising only through comparison. All I knew was that Calvin seemed to have, 5 years later, fallen in love with me again. After that, he pursued me for a long time. One day, as we were walking by the river, with the brilliant lights stretching across both sides like a galaxy, he looked at me, the lights reflecting in his eyes, warm, amazed, and sincere, and asked, "Eva, should we try again?" I silently and intently looked at him, then smiled. I don't know what motivated me, but it was as if I had forgotten all the hurt he had caused me in the past. I got back together with him. Elise asked me if I had lost my mind. Compared to the overwhelming blessings from ordinary friends, she was the only one who scolded me brutally. She said, "Eva, are you brain damaged? Or is your head filled entirely with water? Did you forget how you and Calvin broke up back then?" I stayed silent. Of course I didn't forget. After breaking up with Calvin, it took me more than a year to appear as if I had moved on, but that was only on the surface. Only I knew that inside me was a bottomless swamp, and at the very bottom of that swamp were the wounds Calvin had left me with. The more I couldn't forget the hurt he gave me, the more I couldn't forget him, the more I told myself to let go and live well. The more I couldn't let go. I wasn't confused. My heart was as clear as a mirror. I saw everything with painful clarity, but I still couldn't control missing him. Couldn't control the ache in my chest. Those sleepless nights holding my phone. Those anxious guesses in the face of his hot and cold attitude. Those moments of breaking down 1 second and feeling relieved the next because he finally replied. And those careful attempts to please him, to hold on to him, when he abandoned me at my most devoted moment, cleanly, decisively, and immediately replaced me. All the extreme love and hatred I felt were sealed at their highest peak, until 5 years later, when we reunited. Only then did the emotions I had buried so deeply start flowing again. So when he started pursuing me again, there was a twisted sense of satisfaction inside me. It felt like watching, from a distance, the man who once discarded me so firmly, and now seeing him mesmerized by me again. Do you love him? I asked myself deep down. Truthfully, I didn't know the answer. But the moment we got back together, my heart did not rise with thoughts like he's finally changed or, I must cherish him now. Instead, as I calmly watched him become restless because of me, what surfaced in my mind was, so you finally taste this too, Calvin, you finally do. Chapter 6. I told Elise that I didn't know what was going on with me. When Calvin posted my photo today, my first reaction wasn't to feel moved or happy. I just, for the first time in a long while, remembered the post he made 5 years ago, about another girl. 5 years had passed. It was strange. I thought I had already forgotten. I thought I had moved on, that I no longer cared. I told myself not to dwell on things from 5 years ago, but I couldn't help it. Every word from that time was as clear as day in my mind. But unlike before, when remembering it made my heart ache, today, when the memory resurfaced, I felt no emotional turmoil. I could even smile at Calvin, without missing a beat. Polite, distant, and indifferent. Elise rolled her eyes at me, the same way she did when I told her I was getting back together with Calvin. She told me there were only 3 possibilities for a broken mirror being pieced back together. There's no break, there's no mirror, and there's no mending. Then she asked me, Eva, what do you think? Which one are you and Calvin? I didn't know. After talking to Elise, around 10 p.m., I got a call from Calvin. His tone was calm as he asked, "Are you home? You didn't reply to my message." I was worried. I pretended to be nonchalant, saying, "I was busy and forgot." "Sorry." He smiled and said generously, "It's fine, as long as you're home." That's good. Then he paused and added, next time, let me know when you're home. I'll worry. This version of Calvin, so humble and accommodating, was probably the first time I'd ever seen him act like this. I thought he must have sensed my coldness, and he was trying hard to repair our relationship, trying to patch up that crack between us, but it felt like our roles had completely reversed. I didn't know why, but suddenly, I felt a strange, malicious pleasure. His pain and his attempts to test me made me laugh with a sense of satisfaction I hadn't felt in a long time. I interrupted him softly. Let's not talk about it. I'm going to take a shower. The truth was, I had already taken one. I just wanted an excuse to do my own thing. Before going to bed, I saw that he had sent me a few messages on WeChat. Are you done with your shower? Look at this cat. So cute. Below was a video from TikTok. Are you asleep? Sleeping? I waited a long time. I'm going to sleep now. Good night. I smiled, not replying to a single one. It wasn't really to get back at him. I just wasn't interested. It felt like everything about him had become dull to me. The next morning, I pretended to reply to him, sorry. I was so tired I accidentally fell asleep. Good morning. His reply came almost immediately, it's fine. I understand. Then he added, next time, remember to tell me if you're too tired and need to rest. I waited for you for a long time yesterday. I smiled to myself, wondering if, while waiting for me, Calvin thought about how the Ava from 5 years ago, humiliated and broken, waited for him. But it was also kind of satisfying. After 5 years, he finally understood, felt what I had felt back then, and I felt strangely relieved. Chapter 7. The first conflict between Calvin and I after we got back together happened in the 3rd month. Well, it wasn't really a conflict. One day, just before the end of the workday, he texted me saying that his meeting would end in 15 minutes, and he'd come pick me up afterward. We had planned to have dinner together. I looked at the message and, politely, replied, no need. It's rush hour, so it'll be crowded. I'll just go by myself. Such consideration and understanding. Linda happened to walk past me and saw the message. Letting out a chuckle, she said, Eva, the way you're handling your relationship, anyone who doesn't know would think you're going out to dinner with a client, not your boyfriend. So formal. I smiled and didn't say anything. I don't know if all couples that get back together are like Calvin and me. Not enough intimacy, but plenty of formality. I waited at the restaurant for over half an hour, and he was late. At the 35-minute mark, I sent him a message, I'm leaving. I received his apology call while I was on my way home. He was usually calm, but this time his voice carried a rare urgency. He explained that 2 issues in the project hadn't been settled, so the meeting ran longer than expected. After a pause, he said, Eva, I'll head over now. I interrupted him, speaking softly and gently. It's okay, Calvin. I'm already on my way home. We can reschedule for another time. There was a brief pause, and I could tell he sounded a little down. I wasn't sure why he was upset. After all, I was being understanding and considerate. Maybe he was disappointed that I didn't wait for him like I used to. Maybe in his mind, I should have stayed at that restaurant, waiting until his meeting was done, and then smiled at him, saying it was okay. Just like the old Ava, I remembered a long time ago, back when Calvin and I were in a long-distance relationship. One time, I asked for leave to visit him. It was the dead of winter, and I waited outside his school for 2 hours. I kept calling his phone, but no one answered. I was too scared to leave because we had made plans, and I was worried he wouldn't find me. I waited and waited until 3 hours later. When I finally got through to him, he had been playing games with his roommates all night, forgetting about our plans and sleeping in late. I was so hurt and disappointed that day. My hands and feet were numb from the cold. But by then, our relationship had already started to show signs of trouble. I couldn't even get angry or complain, because I knew he wouldn't comfort me. I could only look at him with a sense of helplessness, and the harshest thing I said was, Calvin, how could you do this? What was his reaction back then? Oh, he gave a nonchalant laugh. His tone cold. If you couldn't reach me, you should have just left. Why wait at the gate? Silly? I had so many things I wanted to say, but I was frozen. not knowing what to respond. It was probably because those who are used to being favored feel untouchable. Now, as I walked away like Calvin once said I should, he was the one apologizing to me. I saw Calvin while I was going downstairs to take out the trash. He was sitting on the steps outside my building, wearing a white shirt, his suit jacket draped over his arm. He looked as though he had been sitting there for a long time, with a vacant look in his eyes, as if lost in thought. I was a little surprised. "Calvin?" He looked up at me when he heard my voice. His sharp brows and bright eyes were still the same, but there was a slight furrow in his brow, and his expression seemed lonely, as if carrying a heavy heart. There were flowers and a beautifully wrapped gift box beside him. I paused and asked, "What are you doing sitting here?" He looked at me intently, his gaze focused and serious. After a long pause, he asked, "Ava, when we got back together, I forgot to ask you." He hesitated for a moment, which was rare for him, as he was always so sure of everything. It was strange to see him uncertain. He was a man who always calculated everything carefully, making sure everything was in place before taking action. But now, as he looked at me, there was a hint of confusion in his eyes, and he asked, "Ava, do you still love me?" He looked deeply into my eyes. I opened my mouth but couldn't answer him. Such simple words, and yet, I couldn't say them. Before this moment, I always thought that even though I hated him, I still loved him. After all, why else had I not been able to forget him all these years? But when he asked me that question, I couldn't bring myself to answer. Chapter 8. Calvin and I had fallen into a strange situation. We both knew, deep down, that we were merely maintaining the appearance of harmony, pretending everything was fine. But we both knew, in truth, we could never go back. I acted weary of everything related to Calvin, but thankfully, the busy work schedule provided me with a perfect excuse. Because I was busy with work, I could cancel dates with him, refuse dinner plans, and reply to his messages very late. So much so, that I even forgot his birthday. His birthday happened to fall on the day we wrapped up a project. After a dinner celebration with the team, it was already past midnight when I returned home. That's when I saw Calvin. He was waiting downstairs, looking troubled, head lowered, smoking. I was a little surprised and asked him why he was here. He looked almost more exhausted than I was. From a distance, his tone calm, he asked, "Ava, I sent you a message." I frowned. I was working, didn't have time to check. He nodded, as if indifferent to my explanation. He paused for a long while before saying, "It's my birthday today. I just wanted to have dinner with you." It was only then that I realized. Instinctively, I apologized. "Sorry, I forgot." Perhaps my apology seemed too casual, as his expression didn't soften much. His gaze fixed on my face as he said, "I've been waiting for your message. Even if you just told me you were busy, it would have been fine. You could forget my birthday. But an hour ago, you posted an update. You seemed happy at your team's dinner. The guy standing next to you, blocking the alcohol, who was that?" I furrowed my brow, and the slight guilt for forgetting his birthday began to fade. I looked at him, expressionless, and asked, "What do you mean?" Calvin sighed, his gaze drifting past me, as if lost in thought. His expression was a mix of restraint and what seemed like nostalgia. He said, "After our breakup, I always felt guilty for how things ended. When we got back together, I wanted to cherish it. But Ava, what about you? Are you still standing in the same place?" I didn't answer. After a long pause, he finally said, "Let's take a break." I said, "Okay." And then, Calvin disappeared from my world. But his disappearance didn't seem to affect me. I went on with my usual routine, working, attending meetings, spending time with friends, even reviewing trendy restaurants with Elise. Honestly, I was happy. If Calvin hadn't contacted me, I might have completely forgotten about him. I don't know how many days passed since we stopped talking, but I received a message from Calvin. He asked me for the password to an app we had both registered for. I sent it to him without hesitation. Then he asked, "How do you plan to spend your birthday?" Our birthdays were only a couple of months apart. When he asked, I could only politely and distantly reply, Elise is hosting a celebration with some friends at her place. He fell silent, and I wasn't sure what he meant by that. My birthday was quite lively. Then, at some point, Elise suddenly stood by the window, making a sound of surprise. Her expression was a strange, mysterious excitement as she quietly beckoned me to come over. I walked over, and she pointed out a tall figure standing downstairs, lowering her voice to ask, "Wait, is that Calvin?" I looked carefully for a moment, then froze. It really was him. I didn't know when Calvin had arrived, nor how long he had been waiting. He hadn't messaged me. He seemed to be idly walking around the car, and after a while, he grew tired and stood next to it, head lowered, leaning against the door, lost in thought. After a moment, he looked up at the countless lights flickering from the buildings above. I instinctively took a step back. It was an unnecessary move. He didn't know which floor Elisa's apartment was on, so he couldn't possibly see me. But for some reason, at that moment, I didn't want him to see me. Elisa's voice was full of excitement, almost with a sense of vindication. "I can't believe it. Calvin has finally met his match. It's the turn of the tide." Huh? She dragged me over to the sofa, laughing joyfully. "Come on, Eva. Stay at my place tonight. Let Calvin wait. I hope he waits all night and gets eaten alive by mosquitoes." For some reason, I suddenly remembered the time a long time ago when I waited for him. I was afraid he wouldn't be able to find me, so I wouldn't leave. Maybe Calvin felt the same now. Perhaps he was worried that if he stayed in the car, he might miss me leaving, so he stayed outside, staring at the iron gates of the complex. I suddenly felt a pang in my chest. It wasn't out of sympathy for Calvin. It was because I finally understood why I had gotten back together with him. I finally understood why I hadn't been able to forget him over the last 5 years. It wasn't because of him. It was because, 5 years ago, I had suffered so much. What I couldn't let go of wasn't Calvin. What I couldn't let go of was the emotional abuse. The anxious nights spent waiting for a goodnight message that never came. The seamless betrayals. And the hurt. Elise once said that a broken mirror could only be mended in 3 ways. There was no break, no mirror, and no mending. Now, I knew what kind of broken mirror I had with Calvin. We had never been whole. The reunion 5 years later wasn't because we had fixed anything, it was only because I couldn't accept the loss. I stood up, and Elise stared at me in surprise, grabbing my wrist in shock. "Wait, are you serious? After just a little while, you're already feeling sorry for him? You deserve to have your heart broken for being so hopelessly in love." I smiled softly. "Elise, I've just figured something out. Now, I was the one coldly ignoring Calvin, playing hot and cold, not caring, except for the lack of seamless transitions. How was I any different from how he treated me back then? How was I any different from the person I had once been? Waiting for him, longing for him to care?" Chapter 9. When Calvin saw me, he was surprised. For once, he seemed genuinely flustered, fumbling over his words as he tried to explain. "I didn't want to disturb you. I just didn't want to miss today. That's why I've been waiting down here." "You guys finished so quickly?" "Calvin." I called his name, standing in front of him and smiling. "Since we got back together." I probably hadn't smiled at him this gently. He froze for a moment, and then a faint smile slowly appeared at the corner of his mouth. But before he could fully smile, I said, "Let's break up." The smile that had barely begun to form on his face froze. But I smiled, feeling both relieved and free. "I'm sorry. You know I'm a serious and stubborn person. 5 years ago, you suddenly pulled away, and our story didn't have a proper ending. But today, I suddenly feel like it's okay. It's okay. When we loved, we did our best to make each other happy. And when we no longer loved, we could openly tell each other and wish each other well. I didn't want to be like the old Calvin anymore. Because I suddenly understood. The greatest harm you can do to someone isn't telling them you don't love them anymore. It's not being clear about your feelings. Leaving them to constantly wonder, night after night, whether you still love them or not." Standing upstairs, seeing Calvin like this, I finally understood. I couldn't let myself become like the Calvin I once knew. So, I told him, "Let's break up. Our story should have ended 5 years ago." He paused for a long time. I saw his hand, which had been hanging by his side, clench into a fist and then relax. Then clench again, then relax. He didn't ask me why, just like I hadn't asked him why all those years ago. Finally, he smiled. Maybe it was the blinding streetlights, but I could see a hint of tears in his eyes. He didn't say "I wish you happiness," but after a long pause, he said, "I'm sorry." It was a vague, meaningless sentence, but we both understood what it meant. It was the apology he owed me 5 years ago. I smiled and said, "It's okay. It's okay. I can delete you and the hurt you caused from my memories. It's okay. I can finally let go and love someone else." Before I turned to go upstairs, I said, "Goodbye." He smiled, handsome and graceful, polite yet distant, as if we were meeting for the first time. After a long while, he nodded and said, "Goodbye."